All right, good evening, everybody. I wanted to step in here and give you guys an update as to what's going on in the tropics with what is now Hurricane Dorian. Dorian strengthened today from a tropical storm to a hurricane. Winds are now sustained in Dorian. That's the storm right there at 80 miles an hour. And I was just taking a closer look at the infrared satellite. This is the enhanced infrared. The brighter the reds, the colder the satellite temperatures are measuring. And the colder the cloud tops are, it's an indication of how high they're going in the atmosphere. So those bright colors indicate the very high overshooting cloud tops bubbling up near the center of what is Dorian. And you can see the center. It looks like it's struggling to try to form an eye right there. An eye is a clear center of the hurricane where there's actually a little bit of calm wind, whereas the strongest winds are right around that eye and the eye wall of the storm. So Dorian is getting its act together. One of the most important things that happened today is that Dorian, the track of Dorian, it missed Puerto Rico. So that was great for San Juan and Puerto Rico and the folks there who are still recovering from Maria in 2017. They had heavy rain. I'm sure they had some flash flooding here, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. So they were on the weak side of a strong tropical storm, and now it's a weak hurricane, and it will lift out of here. But the important thing is the circulation did not go over land. So the circulation did not get broken up by some of the mountains that go up to 3,000 or 4,000 feet over Puerto Rico. So the storm's rotation did not get disrupted. What that means is that it's good news for Puerto Rico, but it's bad news for the eventual track of the storm, because it's going to allow the circulation in the storm to develop a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. And so the forecast from the Hurricane Center does take this through the Bahamas, and that's Florida, and it has it sitting off the Florida coast, somewhere on the Florida coast, between Jacksonville and Miami, somewhere in here, as a Cat 3 hurricane on Sunday afternoon. So it would make landfall Sunday night into Monday across the Florida peninsula, but exactly where that spot is going to be is too early to tell. So the forecast cone, you see a lot of this on TV newscasts and online, on social media when we get a storm like this. Here's just a little bit more about what this forecast cone is. It's produced by the National Hurricane Center, and it's their attempt to forecast where the center of the storm is going to be at a certain period of time, at a maximum distance time out 5 days. That's a 5-day forecast there. So it shows the probable track of the center of the storm. And that's really all it's meant to show. Now, here's the thing. It's accurate, but it's not perfect. Only about 2/3 of the time we've found over history does that forecast verify. 1/3 of the time we found that the storm center will actually end up passing outside that forecast cone. So even folks in the Georgia coast and North Carolina and even northern Cuba, you've got to watch this carefully. Even though they're not in the forecast cone, sometimes it can be well north or well south of the cone that the storm track actually ends up going. There is uncertainty in every forecast, and sometimes these forecasts can be very complex, and I'm going to show you some of the complexity here in this forecast in just a minute. It does not show storm size or potential damage. In other words, some hurricanes are very small with a diameter of hurricane force winds only about 40 miles across. Some hurricanes become huge with hurricane force winds 200 miles across. Obviously, that would make a difference as to the potential damage and the scope and scale of the damage. And the storm impacts often extend well outside the cone. So, for example, if this storm forecast cone were to verify and the center were to hit Jacksonville, that's inside the cone, that's 2/3 accurate, but you would get tremendous tropical storm conditions on the Georgia and Carolina coast, and they're outside the cone. So again, the cone is great. It's a great way to eyeball who's at the greatest risk, but it's not perfect and it doesn't show all the threats. Spaghetti plots. So we've seen the spaghetti models be fairly consistent, and they are continuing to be consistent this evening, very tightly clustered into the Florida coast, somewhere between Miami and Jacksonville. Cape Canaveral looks like it's about the center of that right there. And actually, this is the latest update of these spaghetti plots. Earlier, we had some of these kind of tailing off toward New Orleans. We do not see that now on this latest run. So the computers are thinking that a little trough that eventually digs down here is going to help to pick the storm up after landfall. And perhaps it will only be one landfall. It's possible this thing could go across Florida, impact Tampa, get into the Northeast Gulf, and then make another landfall in Florida It's a possibility, but that's way out in time. We're talking about Monday, Tuesday of next week, and that forecast that far out has a lot of uncertainty in it. So that's what the latest spaghetti plots look like. Again, they kind of show the uncertainty in the forecast, but you get the general consensus. Now, what is driving that forecast? What are the computer models seeing in the atmosphere that have it bending off to the west and then curving back up the east coast? Well, here's what's going on. That's the circulation at 18,000 feet. So this is at 500 millibars. We're looking at winds in the middle level of the atmosphere. And it's interesting. You can see the circulation around Dorian. This is the forecast for tomorrow at 6:30 in the evening. But look at the feature to the north of Dorian. See the clockwise flow? That is a mountain of high pressure in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. That's a blocking high. Think of that mountain of air as keeping Dorian from moving north. Now, the Coriolis force wants everything that moves in the northern hemisphere to bend off to the right. So Dorian wants to bend to the north just based on the Coriolis force. But it can't do that as long as this mountain is sitting on top of it, blocking it from going to the north. And when I put this in motion and watch the forecast, watch how these two move together. What you're going to see is that the mountain of air to the north is going to move due west, and it's going to force Dorian to move almost due west. Remember, Dorian wants to go north, but it can't because it's being blocked by that high pressure. So watch, we'll put this in motion. Watch both these areas. Here we go. And they move in unison. So the center of that high pressure stays to the north, and it stays quite strong, and that just won't allow Dorian to move north. It's being absolutely blocked by that high pressure area, and that's why the storm is being pushed further west than it really wants to go. That ridge of high pressure forecast to push Dorian further west into Florida. Now, eventually, we think the western edge of that ridge of high pressure is going to weaken. And that's because, can you see this feature right here? There's a little trough digging down. Eventually, that's going to make a space for Dorian to move north, but it might not be until it gets back into it might make a little trek across the far northeast Gulf before it moves back to the north. Again, at the moment, spaghetti plots, hurricane forecasts do not take it into the western Gulf where Houston and Texas are, but obviously with all of these, we watch it very carefully. And just for example, you can see how complex the motion in the atmosphere is at 18,000 feet. You know, here's our ridge of high pressure, here's a trough, here's another ridge out to the west. There's a little upper level low moving into the Gulf right here. That's also helping to pull Dorian to the west. It's very complicated, and the computers try to figure all this stuff out, but they're not perfect. That's why there's uncertainty in every one of these hurricane forecasts and why we watch them like a hawk. Okay, so 3 things to know about Dorian. Dorian is now a hurricane. It is forecast to be a major hurricane. That means winds sustained above 110 miles an hour at landfall as it heads into Florida, making landfall there forecast this coming Sunday night. So this is going to be a Labor Day hurricane for Florida here in 2019. We're going to get an update on the track from the Hurricane Center, updated track. We'll have updated computer models. All this will be live, and I'll have it for you on KHOU 11 News at 10 o'clock tonight. I hope you'll join us then for the update.